Number 9. K-152 Nerpa accident. During sea trials on a nuclear submarine fleet in 2008, a faulty firefighting system went off inside one of the vessels, releasing a poisonous fire suppressant into the cabin. Tragically, 20 people died from inhaling the freon gas as the dangerous substance depleted their surroundings of oxygen, and 21 more were injured. Sadly, the portable breathing gear that was on board failed to save the crew, but nobody seemed to know why. In the initial aftermath of the disaster, Russian officials said that they also didn't know what set off the emergency system. The authorities zeroed in on Captain Dmitry Lavrentiev and engineer Dmitry Grobov, whom they accused of death by negligence. They alleged that Grobov had accidentally turned the emergency system on, and that Lavrentiev had trained the crew improperly, leading to their deaths. The men argued that the submarine's equipment was faulty and were acquitted in 2012, but the verdict was overturned. There was a retrial the following year, and they were once again found innocent. The K-152 Nerpa accident, as it came to be called, was Russia's worst submarine accident since 2000, when 118 people died in what's known as the Kursk nuclear submarine disaster. 2 years after the Nerpa accident, the submarine involved was leased to India for 10 years. Hopefully, whatever was wrong with it was fixed. Number 8. Lost P38 Squadron. During World War II, the US rushed hundreds of warplanes to the British Isles to help Great Britain fight the Nazis, but not all these aircraft reached their destinations. In July of 1942, for example, 6 Lockheed P-38 fighter jets and 2 B-17 bombers were forced to make emergency landings in Greenland due to harsh weather. The crew members walked away unscathed and were rescued, thankfully, but they had no choice other than to abandon the planes in an ice field. Over the following decades, 268 feet of snow accumulated on top of the 8 vehicles. Members of the Greenland Expedition Society brought one of the P-38 fighters to the surface in 1992, after years of searching and digging. Nicknamed P-38 Glacier Girl, the aircraft was restored to flying condition and took to the skies again in 2002. 2 years later, a pilot tried to fly the Glacier Girl along the original route across the Atlantic that it had failed to complete 65 years earlier. But the aircraft sprang a coolant leak and was unfortunately grounded in Labrador, Canada. In 2018, a team returned to the site where the planes have been deserted and found another P-38 nicknamed Echo. They announced plans to take it apart and raise it piece by piece, and have also been trying to raise another P-38 known as the Lightning. Eventually, the group would like to recover all 8 of the missing planes and bring them back to the surface. Number 7. Deadly helicopter disaster. Earlier this year, an MH-60S Seahawk helicopter carrying 6 US Navy crew members began wobbling from side to side aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier off the San Diego coast. Then, it plunged into the ocean. The Navy and Coast Guard launched a 4-day search and rescue effort and managed to save 1 crew member, but never found the other 5 crew members' bodies. They called off the search and declared the sailors dead. 5 other sailors aboard the aircraft carrier were injured in the ordeal, with 2 requiring treatment off the ship. The Navy launched an investigation into the cause of the accident and found that the helicopter's rotors had struck the deck before it began to shake and fell overboard. At the last update, the investigation was ongoing, so limited details were being released to the public. It was the 11th crash with a manned naval vehicle to occur this year, according to statistics from the Naval Safety Center. There were 9 such incidents in 2020 and 5 in 2019. These numbers point toward a troubling upward trend in accidents over the last 3 years. It's unclear whether any action is being taken to get to the bottom of the matter, or if corrective action is being taken to prevent history from repeating itself. Number 6. HMS Urge. After leaving Malta in April 1942, the British submarine HMS Urge never reached its destination port at Alexandria in Egypt. And until recently, nobody knew what had happened to it. The wreck was finally discovered 2 years ago off the Maltese coast, where it came to rest 400 feet below the water's surface after being struck by a mine. For the past 20 years, experts from the University of Malta have been working to map the seafloor in the region. Francis Dickinson, whose grandfather grandfather was the Urge's commander, reached out to the university in hopes that they could locate the wreck. Lo and behold, an underwater vehicle found the submerged submarine using sonar. The British Ministry of Defense announced the news after confirming that it was the HMS Urge. During the vehicle's absence, there was widespread speculation about where it had ended up and how it got there. In 2015, Belgian historian Jean-Pierre Misson claimed to have found the submarine off the coast of Libya, far from its planned course, but ongoing conflicts with the country prevented experts from looking further into it, and we now know since its discovery off Malta that Misson's suspicions were incorrect. Number 5. Flight 19. In 1945, a group of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, took off out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida for a routine naval training exercise. The triangular flight plan involved passing over a place called Hens and Chickens Shoals, then heading over Grand Bahama Island and back to base. Led by experienced pilot and war veteran Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, the flight initially went as planned. Things took a turn for the worse thought after the team turned left to head north for the second leg of their trip. For some reason, Lieutenant Taylor became convinced that his navigation equipment was malfunctioning and that they were flying in the wrong direction. The pilots became further disoriented when they encountered heavy gusts of wind and rain. Taylor said over the radio that he believed that they were over the Florida Keys, which would mean that they were several hundred miles off course. Some experts believe that he had confused the Bahamas for the Keys and thought that they were in the Gulf of Mexico. He made the fateful decision to fly northeast, taking them further out to sea. Taylor's men knew something wasn't right. At one point, they convinced him to turn west, but he once again changed the flight's direction eastward. Radio transmissions grew weak as the planes ran low on fuel. Taylor instructed the pilots to prepare to ditch. A Navy search team immediately sprang into action and searched for the confused crew by boat. Not only have the downed aircraft never been found, the search team also vanished and was never seen again. It's possible, or perhaps even likely, that the planes are sitting at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle. But until or unless someone finds them, we'll never know for sure what their fate was. To avoid blaming Taylor for whatever happened, the Navy amended its existing report on the incident, stating that the cause of the disappearance was unknown, after initially concluding that he had mistook the Bahamas for the Florida Keys. Number 4. USS Bunnum Richard. The Continental Navy warship USS Bunnum Richard was originally a merchant ship for the Dutch East India Trading Company. In 1779, the French donated it to the Patriots, who were fighting for American freedom from Great Britain. In the following weeks, it captured 16 British vessels under the direction of Naval Commander John Paul Jones. But the Bunnum Richard's glory days were short-lived. Just months after being given to the Patriots, it caught several bullets and was lit on fire in the North Sea during the Battle of Flamborough Head. Jones and his crew fought to keep the vessel afloat for 36 hours, but they ultimately gave up and abandoned the ship off the northeastern coast of England. The wreck has never been found. While a few potential matches have been spotted, they have yet to be positively identified as the Bunnum Richard. Finding the ship is proving to be difficult due to the sheer number of wrecks in the area, as well as over a century's worth of fishing trawler nets being dragged across the seafloor. The authorities haven't moved on identifying any wrecks as the Bunnum Richard due to disagreements between the US and France over who owns the ship. If the two countries can come to an understanding, perhaps the process can move along more quickly. But there's always a chance that none of the potential matches will turn out to be the downed Patriot vessel and that the search will continue. Number 3. The last US helicopter lost in Vietnam. The US withdrew from Vietnam in 1973, but some of the last remaining American military members didn't leave Saigon until 1975. During these final evacuations, a CH-46 Sea Knight helicopter crashed into the South China Sea with 2 US pilots aboard. They were the last pilots to die in Vietnam. The crash happened roughly 17 miles from the coastal city of Vung Tao in waters between 65 and 100 feet deep. Neither the pilots' bodies nor the helicopter were ever found. In 2016, a group of Marines longing for closure campaigned for the US government to search for the wreck. Their mission, named the Yankee Tango 14 Recovery Project, named after the chopper's ID number, claims to know the coordinates of the fatal disaster. Not everyone with a personal connection to the tragedy agreed with the idea. Steve Neistel, whose brother Captain William Neistel went down in the crash, told the San Diego Tribune in 2016 that the money it would cost to search for the wreck would be better spent caring for disabled veterans. On the other hand, he said that he and his family wouldn't oppose the search if the military decided that it was the right thing to do. His personal opinion, though, was that the pilots should be left to rest in peace. The US government also hesitated to pursue the recovery. One official stated that underwater investigations are difficult at best due to the tendency for storms and currents to push them around along the ocean floor. While it's easy to think that anyone who's lost a loved one at war would want the remains brought home, situations like this prove that this isn't always the case and that sometimes it's best to leave someone in their original resting place. Number 2. Flying Tiger Flight 379. In the early stages of the Vietnam War, the US military chartered a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation propliner called the Flying Tiger Flight Line 739. One day in March 1962, it left Travis Air Force Base in California for Saigon with 11 civilian crew members, 93 US Army Ranger specialists, and 3 Vietnamese soldiers aboard. There were 4 planned refueling stops along the route, including Honolulu, Wake Island, Guam, and the Philippines. After stopping to refuel in Guam, the plane headed for Clark Air Base in the Philippines. It vanished along the way without sending any distress calls, sparking one of the largest sea and air searches in the history of the Pacific. After 8 days went by without finding any trace of the wreckage, the search was called off, even though a civilian had reported seeing what appeared to be an in-flight explosion the night the aircraft disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to the Flying Tiger. The plane had 9.5 hours worth of fuel left, and there were just 6 hours left of its journey, so it's unlikely that it ran out of fuel. The Civil Aeronautics Board concluded that the aircraft probably exploded in flight, as the witness had described, but they were unable to pinpoint a possible cause. Sadly, that's the only closure that the authorities were able to deliver to the families of the soldiers who went down with the plane, most likely to a watery grave that still exists but hasn't been found. To this day, the presumed crash ranks as the worst aviation accident involving a plane from the Lockheed Constellation series. Number 1. USS Scorpion. The Cold War never erupted into direct combat between the US and the Soviet Union, but both countries' militaries worked diligently to monitor the other in hopes of staying one step ahead amid rising tensions and ongoing fears of a nuclear attack. One way they did this was by conducting submarine surveillance and developing nuclear submarine warfare capabilities. One such nuclear-powered submarine was a Navy vessel called the USS Scorpion. It set off from Norfolk, Virginia in 1968 for a 3-month deployment with a 99-man crew aboard. The vehicle was headed for the Mediterranean to conduct Soviet naval reconnaissance. A few months later, the Scorpion left Spain and headed back toward Norfolk, but it failed to arrive as scheduled, and the submarine's disappearance quickly escalated into a major military crisis. The Navy found the wreck off the Azores in October, 5 months after the Scorpion was scheduled to arrive back in the US. No official cause for the sinking was ever determined. 1968 was an eventful year for when it came to the disappearance of submarines. In addition to the Scorpion, 3 other subs vanished under mysterious circumstances, including the Israeli INS Dakar, the French Minerve, and the Soviet submarine K-129. Some believe that the Scorpion's disappearance resulted from a violent US-Soviet encounter, but other theories suggest that structural damage or an accidental explosion could have been responsible for the wreck. Thanks for watching. Would you like to learn more about military vehicle accidents? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time!